Hello, everyone. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another episode of the Cast. Today, we're going to be talking mostly about Granblue Fantasy Relink, and I brought in the local anime expert, extraordinaire, Globku. How you doing, Globku?
Hello, Rory. Doing fantastic. Thank you for the invitation to talk about what is one of my most anticipated games this year. I was definitely expecting a release date, but they didn't give us one. At least they did confirm that the game's still due out in 2023. But so that's reassuring at the very least. But yeah, Granblue Fantasy Relink. It's been a while. It's been a long development process.
It's been an extremely long development process. I actually was going to ask you if you remember that Gamescom. I'm not sure if it was 2015 or 16, where we actually went into the Xbox booth. We had no appointments whatsoever. But we were still able to like finesse our way and like, hey, we need to go see Scalebound.
And we saw Scalebound.
We saw Scalebound being played, and I think Hideki Kamiya was there, even if I remember correctly, right? Wasn't it Hideki?
I believe so.
Yeah, with the translator. Yeah, so we saw Scalebound being played. I think both of us bought Xboxes, right? For Scalebound. Both of us bought Xboxes for Scalebound. And then Microsoft canceled it, and that's when I became aware of Granblue Fantasy Relink. Was immediately after Microsoft canceled it, I went to the Platinum Games website. I was like, okay, so what are they working on? And they were working on Granblue Fantasy Relink, and I was like, oh, this seems interesting. And then they got kicked out of the project, or I don't know, stopped working on it for some reason or whatever.
Yeah, the news seemed very amicable, but stuff like that doesn't just happen amicably, right? Platinum Games started developing the game. They had a couple of gameplay demos that they put out, but at some point it was like, well, Platinum Games will no longer be developing the game. CyGames will now take over development. So that was very friendly. I don't think that's how it went.
That was like the first time that I started kind of like looking at Platinum Games differently, because up until that point I was like, dude, Platinum Games is so good. Look at Bayonetta, look at Vanquish, look at all of these things they're doing, friggin' the Wonderful 101, look at all these amazing projects. These guys are awesome. I love them. And then suddenly it's like Microsoft doesn't want to work with them anymore. And I was like, goddamn you, Microsoft, you're terrible. And then suddenly CyGames doesn't want to work with them anymore. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? And then we have Babylon's Fall. It's like, oh my God, what is this?
What is going on with Platinum?
So yeah, I don't know what's going on with Platinum, but that was just like, this game was one of the reasons why I discovered this game was because of Platinum Games. And that's the reason why I started following it. And that leads us to CyGames.
I do think that the Platinum downfall has been happening for a few years. It hasn't happened yet, and they can, of course, like bounce back from it. But if you look back at Platinum Games and look at the genre that they almost created by themselves, looking at the games that they put out, the best game in a Platinum genre isn't even from Platinum Games, and that's Devil May Cry. That is the perfection of the Platinum formula. Isn't a Platinum game, and how did someone else get there before they did? It's very weird.
Yeah, it was a very strange situation. But I started looking into CyGames, and the interesting thing is that CyGames also has another game that's been in development for a very long time that I've also been following, and that we haven't heard from in God knows how long, which is Project Awakening. They're also the ones behind that.
What is Project Awakening? That sounds like something.
It was, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's just a dude with armor, sword and shield. I mean, the gameplay footage that you see, it's a dude, sword and shield, and then he's fighting like this dragon-looking thing without wings, like a giant lizard. And yeah.
And that's it.
That's all you get. It's like the gameplay looked phenomenal, but this was like, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that. It was wild. But yeah, so CyGames has a couple of things under the belt. And Granblue Fantasy Relink comes from another CyGames project, which is just Granblue Fantasy, which is a mobile game, a gacha game. Now, I personally don't know a whole lot about Granblue Fantasy because I did not play it. I don't know a lot about the characters. I believe there was also an animation that they've worked on. I'm not sure if that's been localized or not. Have you seen any of that stuff?
I've seen it. I don't think I pirated it. I don't remember. It has been a while. No, you're talking about localization, and I did see it
Yeah.
with subtitles, but I don't remember where.
Might have been,
That said, yeah,
let's call it Crunchyroll.
I did. Yeah, I saw it on a Crunchyroll. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, they put out this big mobile game, Granblue Fantasy. It makes a ton of money, mostly in the Asian markets, and they start expanding into the West with games like Relink, and before Relink came Granblue Fantasy Versus, a fighting game.
Yeah.
Granblue Fantasy Versus was probably the reason why I even discovered Granblue Fantasy at all. And because the character design is so cool, I decided to watch the anime. It's totally One Piece. It's basically what it is. It's One Piece, but you're in a ship, and instead of pirates, you're adventurers. And the ship doesn't go through the seas; it goes through the sky. And you visit these different sky islands. Every island has its little contained story within. But it also feels like every character you meet is somehow a hero or a good person, even if they're a villain at first. They end up redeeming themselves because that's a character that they want you to spend money on to pull on the gacha, right? So it has that kind of feeling, that kind of a structure. I think they put out 2 seasons of the anime. I watched the first one, could not get through the second one.
Okay.
But
So you didn't like it very much, I take it.
no, it's because the story wasn't pulling me, but the characters and the arcs for each character are very well written. I will say
Okay.
that. But there's like the narrative thread that was pulling you towards the end. I felt like I had seen it before. And I felt like, unlike One Piece, I feel like Granblue Fantasy will never end. Because One Piece is able to tell this very big story. Every time they land on a new island, they are telling a new story, but then the island is over and they move on closer to the One Piece, to finding the final goal. And even though it's been over 10 years,
I don't think
it does feel like we're getting closer to the end.
I don't think One Piece is going to end either.
Well, it is 100% is going to end 100%. Granblue Fantasy has that feeling that it will never end.
That almost
will
sounded
keep coming up with new islands.
that almost sounded like a threat to like the people working on One Piece. You're like, oh, it's gonna end. I'll make
Oh,
sure
it's gonna end. Oh, I'll make sure it will end. No, it's the stakes get higher and higher, and
Okay.
it's kind of a genius storytelling. I've never seen a story told through that long of a period, with like callbacks and consequences to stuff that happened 10 years ago. You know,
That
it's
almost sounds like Final Fantasy 14, to be honest, the way that you're describing
okay.
it.
Well, just we're selling Final Fantasy 14 again.
No. It's just like it came to mind when you were saying
You want to
that.
lose me too?
No.
You'll just lose me to Final Fantasy 14, and then you'll be out of guests for a podcast.
Stop. But anyway, so I actually find the premise that you just talked about, because this is something that is shown in the most recent trailer. They go on the spaceship and they go on adventures in different islands. Like
Spaceship.
airship.
Yes.
Airship. It's like, the reason I said spaceship is because this reminds me also, like, if you think, for instance, in terms of Mass Effect, it's kind of like a similar premise, right? You go on the
Okay.
Normandy and you go on different adventures. That's why I said spaceship, because I was going to
Yeah.
bring that up. Like, I really like that premise. I think it's very interesting to just have, you have your crew, you go on a ship and you go to places. I think that is a cool thing to constantly explore. The ship kind of works as your headquarters, stuff like that. So if that is going to be the main premise of it, I think that is going to be a very interesting gameplay experience, personally.
Yeah, in the context of Relink, it gives them enough freedom to do whatever sceneries they want to do, whatever like environmental hazards, and every mission could just easily take place in a completely different area, because you've got all these areas to pull from the Granblue Fantasy universe. I think in the end, Mass Effect has more of a cohesive narrative, where even though you are landing on a planet, you are learning about a new alien race and their struggles, and kind of solving that narrative in that little arc. It all contributes to a bigger story. In Granblue Fantasy, you don't feel like that stuff is contributing to a bigger story, but it's still interesting to learn about each individual character in those islands, because one, CyGames are masters at character design. They are masters at presenting a character to you just design wise and being like, yeah, I want to learn more about that character.
Okay.
It's super appealing in that way. And then you learn more about that character in that little island segment. You learn where they come from, what are their goals, what are their fears. And once the adventure is done, the story didn't really move forward, but you learn more about them, and maybe you have a new crewmate. You know,
Okay.
that's the kind of
Um,
story.
so it's more self-contained stories than necessarily like massive overarching narrative. I still believe that probably for the game itself, they're going to have like some kind of a narrative thread. I
Hmm.
believe that the main character is also not a part of the Granblue Fantasy Gacha characters, right? The main character for this game, I think it's like an original character that they made.
I don't think so.
No?
Isn't it Gran? I think it's Gran. So
Okay.
in the gacha game, you have two main characters. You can pick male or female. And in Granblue Fantasy Versus, the main character Gran
Okay.
came out in the base roster, and the female character is called Jita, and she was DLC. So they usually put out both of them, but there is a main character. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
oh, maybe you're talking about the blue-haired girl.
No, I was talking about the actual main character because for some reason when I was watching the trailer yesterday, they were saying something like, "Oh, this is the main character, the protagonist. We made him like easy to play or whatever." And for some reason, I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that I associated that with them making like a new character, but I guess
No,
not. Yeah,
no, no.
because
They were talking about Gran. Gran is definitely the main character of the show. His mission is to protect this blue-haired woman, but she's not. She's a non-combatant. She's like she can summon dragons, but she doesn't fight. So I don't think she will be playable. She usually isn't. Even in verses, she shows up like during Gran's intro and Jita's intro, like standing behind them. Yo, stay behind. I'll get this one, and then
okay,
they'll piss off, and you just fight as Gran.
okay. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up as well is the visuals of the game,
Mm,
which I kind of thought that back then when they were working on the game for the very first time, it was a style that wasn't. I mean, the first trailers that I saw and stuff, it was a style that wasn't as prevalent as it is right now, which made it very striking visually, like the whole cell shaded but really detailed and super. The animations themselves felt very very fluid because you see the cell shading style, but usually, unless you're like in a fighter, the cell shaded
mm.
style back then, you didn't see like as fluid animations as you were seeing for Granblue Fantasy Relink. But now I feel like that style has been a lot more prevalent in a lot more video games, and you probably have seen plenty of them. With the latest trailer, how do you think that the visuals kind of like stack up against some of the other games that have that kind of like visual style?
Right. I did feel that when I first saw it, it really blew my mind. It
Yeah,
was the best looking anime game I've ever seen, 100%. But as time went on and video games got more and more impressive, it started to become less impressive, but I still think it looks fantastic,
yes,
honestly. And
exactly. It looks
a
good.
lot of it is not, a lot of it now is not, okay, I look at this character and it's the best looking character I've ever seen. It's not that anymore. They kind of look a little bit plasticky, honestly. But when you see the game in motion and how much they're doing with the environments and the animation of attacks, it still looks really really good. I
Yeah,
think.
I think the animations themselves is kind of like the key component of why the game looks so good. Because, for instance, I had some people comment recently on my video, and they were saying like, "Oh, no, it wasn't on my video. It was on the trailer. Might have been on the trailer. No, I saw this comment somewhere. Someone was saying, "Oh, Tales of Arise 2." And I was like, "Okay." So the thing about it is like Tales of Arise has that same similar art style, but if you look at Tales of Arise, my argument is that the maps in Tales of Arise are very much self-contained, and you have like walls that are very, very specific. Like you see, for instance, a stone or something, and you have to go
Mm,
around that stone.
yeah.
And if you look at something like Granblue Fantasy, it seems like, dude, I can just jump over this mantle vault, do a million different ways to cross over an obstacle. There's
Yeah.
a much
It's
wider degree of freedom.
action movement instead of our RPG movement,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I see what you mean, but I also see the Tales comparison for sure.
Yeah.
That's a game that wasn't even announced back when this was announced. So naturally, this game really blew our minds when it first showed up.
Yeah, when it first showed up, but now you know, when people look at the visuals, they're probably going to think, oh, it doesn't look that impressive. But I think that the game in motion is going to be the thing that sells
Exactly.
people on it. Even though unfortunately, like the Japanese streams are so incredibly blurry because I think
Why?
they're
Every time there's a Japanese gameplay stream, it's just blur.
yeah, dude.
It's
I
like
think
they haven't figured out the technology.
no, they're allergic to bitrate, dude. It's like it can't go too high, or everybody just like starts breaking into like sneezes and scratching, and goes like, "Oh, my allergy to bitrate." It was the same thing with Monster Hunter Rise as well, which is also from a Japanese developer. Like whenever they came up with new videos and stuff, I'd look at them and I'm like, "Bro, these pixels are the size of my thumb, dude. What are you doing? These pixels are huge. I need more bitrate." But yeah, another thing that I wanted to bring up: have you seen anything about the structure of the game itself?
Yeah, I think we've gotten little bits and pieces here and there. So the way it will work, and we got new gameplay just this past weekend that reinforced that. You basically jump into a mission, and it's a very self-contained mission. Usually, it has a timer, and the mission they showed this weekend had an 8-minute timer. So maybe that's like the sort of length they're aiming for. You enter matchmaking, you do that mission, 4-player co-op, or you tackle it solo if you want. Some missions might be co-op only, but that I'm not sure. And it usually ends in a boss fight. After the boss fight, there's some loot, and you go back to the hub. So that's basically the structure. Every time you go back to the hub, you talk to a guy in a menu, and the next environment could be completely different for the next mission.
Yeah,
There's a training mode too, if you just want to try out your character and see who you want to take into battle. So you can just practice against the dummy, so you don't jump into a mission without knowing what you're doing, because every character also has very unique gimmicks. So it's worth trying them out before jumping into a mission.
yeah, because you don't want to be jumping in suddenly. Oh, this combo doesn't work like I thought it did. Now everything's completely wonky. But so basically, it has a mission structure where you go from a hub and then you take on a quest, which is in a way similar to Monster Hunters. Kind of like what do you do there? You also go, you pick up a quest, and
Yeah.
then you go on a mission, and boom.
Okay, so I don't know if it's like Monster Hunter where okay, I pick up this monster quest and I'm going onto this area that I already know. I don't know if that's because then in Monster
Yeah,
Hunter, like the monster will spawn, but you still have the whole area to explore if you want to.
yeah.
And this seems a little bit more linear. So I don't know how unique the areas are, if it will have different bosses within the same area or not, or if it will always be like, okay, different planet, different boss, or a different island, different boss. I went to the spaceship there.
Different planet. But yeah, it is the mission type structure. At least we'll have hubs. I'm hoping there'll be more than one because they only show that one village. So I'm hoping that we'll get to see more than just that one village. I don't know because again, I don't speak Japanese. I haven't seen that much information that is not in Japanese, which makes it kind of hard to fully analyze the game. But
Right.
Beyond that, in terms of like gameplay of the actual characters, the thing that it seemed like to me from watching the latest stream footage is like you have light attack on like square. They had
Yep.
your heavy attack, which is a charge attack that you can kind of weave in between your combos on triangle, and then there was like a super combo finisher on
Mm.
circle, and then there were 4 unique skills that you could equip, but
Yeah.
each character has more than 4, so you have to kind of like choose them, almost making a build for each character,
You
and
got it.
then you use those skills depending on the situation. But different characters, it seems like each character has like a very specific gimmick. As in
Yeah.
the guy with the great sword, it was all about you have to time the inputs whenever your character flashes red or something like that, and that will make him more powerful, which I'm assuming will then translate to the skills that you equip onto the character itself as well.
Mm. Yeah, that detail I'm not sure. I think the character only flashes red if you got the timing correct,
Oh,
and
okay.
that will buff your next attack. So it's instead of being something that you like cash out later, it's something that you have to sustain every time you attack. That's how I read it, at least. But again, my Japanese is very limited.
Yeah, but there's what'd you think about the diversity of characters that they've shown so far?
They are a lot more unique than I was expecting, and that is really, really awesome. I think Gran, they kept him pretty basic, as they should, because he's main character, but he also has a he has something that goes up as you combo a character, and so it's called a class for some reason. It shows up class next to the character. So you have class 1, 2, 3, and that levels up as you combo your opponents, and then you can cash out with a special move. So it kind of buffs up your charged attack or your specials. I'm not sure what it buffs up exactly. You have a ranged fighter, but they didn't like just stick with. So Rackham isn't just a ranged fighter. He doesn't just shoot a gun and that's it. That's the uniqueness of the character. No, they gave him an extra meter. They gave him a heat gauge that if it's full, you can charge up your strong attack much faster than if it was empty. And to be willing to go that far with character gimmicks, to be willing to put, okay, let's put another mechanic on top of the mechanics we already have for all the characters. Let's put another meter here on top of that. I think that gives them so much space to be creative, and I think this game is really built for like DLC characters in the future. I think that's going to be the long-term plan
Yeah,
for content, and that's really exciting because you never know what to expect, and I think that's what you want in a game like this.
the when I saw the gauge for the guy with the gun, it made me think like each character can kind of have like their own gimmick, and it's not necessarily a gauge, but it was interesting that he had to tackle the gauge in addition to just like spamming buttons and stuff like that.
Mhm.
The little character, but I don't know what the race name is of those little dudes.
Oh yeah.
But the Yoda dude with the two swords,
Mhm.
that guy's thing, I think, was just like the more you continue to do combos and the faster you start going, the faster he goes and the more damage he deals. And it was wild just how fast that character starts going and completely overwhelming in terms of the special effects on screen.
Yeah, there's a special that slashes the screen. I was really blown away when I saw that. Like the actual screen breaking, it was really cool. Yeah, because let's not forget this is a multiplayer game, and they're going a route where the animations are fitting of a single player game and usually break in multiplayer. But I guess they found a way to like have those effects only show up for the player doing them.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that you won't. You're at least when you have games like that. Nowadays, what I usually see in Japanese games is that they just give you an option to reduce the like the special effects from other players, and you can choose how much you want to see of them. Which kind of in this game is going to be mandatory because otherwise they're just going to be completely sensory overload the entire time.
Hmm. Yeah, and if I may release my first complaint or
Here we
potential
go.
fear, it is that it is kind of heavy on particle effects, and especially when fighting against smaller enemies or smaller bosses, I sometimes have trouble seeing those attacks coming out. It might be because the streams are blurry though, so I'm not too sure. But
Yeah.
I felt this more than once, more than one gameplay demo, where okay, everyone's throwing specials. I cannot see what the boss is doing. Uh, I'm gonna get hit.
So I'm gonna be real. One of the things that I was very sad about is so far there hasn't really been a character with like a shield, like a proper shield character. Like even the main character uses a sword, a one-handed
Hmm,
sword, doesn't have a shield. I'm like, why?
no,
What is
no
this
shield.
aversion that people have to shields? But then you see the gameplay of the Goblin Warrior, whatever it was, the big dude that they were fighting, and that dude has a massive tower shield and he's slamming it down and spinning it around. And I'm like, I want to play that class. I want to be that guy with a big shield, like slapping everybody around with a mega shield. But yeah, and that's just one of the things that I'm always like, bro, where's the shield class? We need a proper shield class. Is there a character with a shield in Granblue? Did you see it in the anime or something?
There probably is. I will say I did not see any in verses. My Granblue fantasy knowledge is very limited to the anime and verses. I
Yeah.
will say you will probably like the look of this guy. So I'm just sending you a link. That's a character that's playable in Granblue Fantasy verses. You tell
Let
me
me
what you
take a
think when you
look
see him. He has no
here.
shield. He has no shield. I'll
That's
preface.
so sad. Sorries, my fists don't lie. He looks badass. He looks like an old man. Yeah, those are usually the type of the archetypes that I go for. Yep, big old man, big beard. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, big punching dude.
So he's a punchy
That's what he
dude.
is. Yeah.
Okay.
He has an install in Granblue Fantasy Versus where the clothes come off because he buffs himself. Just buff muscles, clothes rip off. Very cool dude.
Captain Badass over there. Okay, that kind of works. But
that's a character for you to look forward to. Every time there's DLC, you go, "Oh, let's go, Saurus!" Even though you know nothing about Granblue, you know this guy now. But now he's your favorite.
I'm not sure if he's my favorite yet. Let's not go that far, but we'll see how that works out. But so far, like gameplay wise, the game seems like a lot of fun. One of the concerns that I did have from the stuff that we've seen was the difficulty. It seemed way too easy. Way too easy.
Yeah. And I do hope that I think it will be easy. I think that when you pick up the game, it will be super easy and there will be no challenge at all. Because that's one of the things and one of the philosophies behind the development of these console games is that they want to introduce people to the world of Granblue Fantasy, but they also don't want to exclude the people playing the mobile game. And the fear there is that a lot of these mobile gamers, they have little to no console experience, but we still want to appeal to them. So they have this assist mode. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah, I've seen it. Keep going.
So there's an assist mode where you mash the attack button and the combos happen automatically. So you don't have to combine weak and strong attacks. You don't have to combine weak strong attacks and the finisher or the special moves. They just happen automatically if you mash the light attack button. And then there's like a super assist mode where everything you do is just move your left stick. The character just attacks. So your gameplay is literally just moving the left thumbstick and everything just happens automatically. And yes, one of my biggest fears is that the difficulty will never ramp up, and that will be a viable way to sort of finish the game. I do think that's a good option to have, especially to bring those players on board. I don't know if it is a good teaching tool or a learning tool, because they're going to tackle all the starting missions. If it does ramp up in difficulty eventually, they're going to tackle the starting missions by moving the left thumbstick only. And then when that's not enough, they don't have the tools because they haven't learned the game. So the difficulty either doesn't ramp up at all, and it's just a game where you grind for gacha, or it does ramp up at some point, but you're going to lose those players.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like I said, to me, it seemed very easy. Now, someone mentioned I already made an analysis video, and someone mentioned in the comment section that the developer said something about the characters that they had in that demo were like overgeared for the content, which I'm not sure if that's the case or not. People were saying this in my comment section. I was like, okay, maybe that was the case. But fundamentally, if
look, man, on that note, you've been to enough conventions to play demos on the show floor. How hard is it really? Usually, any demo that you play.
Unless it's like from a Souls game, it's usually super mega giga easy.
Yeah. Right? And this was the playable demo at Granblue Fantasy Festival. So this is the first time that the public is able to play it at all. So yeah, they might be right, honestly.
Yeah, so they made it easier. Hopefully the game itself will be more challenging. Where do you land in the terms of like difficulty? Would you like it there to be multiple difficulty options or just one difficulty that continuously scales?
I like the developer's choice. I really do. Most games that I play are on whatever says it's the recommended difficulty, and whenever it doesn't say it's the recommended difficulty, I go for normal. But yeah, I would like what I
was saying is like, do you want there to be multiple difficulties, or would you rather have
exactly.
one difficulty that scales?
So to that point, I would like to have that one difficulty
Yeah.
that ramps up over time. Because it feels like, as a community, this is a multiplayer game. And as a community, a lot of games don't have that feeling that you got in MMOs or in Souls games, where it's like, yo, I beat that boss. I finally
Yeah.
beat Radahn. When I beat Radahn on Twitter, it was like, my God, I beat Radahn before the nerfs. Let's go. Like, no, this boss will never be the same again. But that was an accomplishment. And I was seeing my friends beating Radahn before I did. I was like, God damn it, I got to get there.
Yeah.
But if there's a difficulty option, like, okay, I beat Radahn. Yeah, what was the difficulty? Like,
Yeah,
not to take away the achievement, and I think like everyone should be able to experience the content they purchased, but at the same time, there has to be, if there is a challenging moment, I think that distinguishes players, or it gives players a different level
it's
of achievement or a different feeling.
it's a different community experience when you can just like swap the difficulty around is what I usually find.
I mean, I think WoW did it really well back in the day. I haven't played WoW in a really long time, but back in the day, you had the raids, and then you had hard mode for the raids, and that was it, right? It wasn't like you switched the difficulty on the entire game. It was like, okay, here's some end game, and here's some really hard end game. And it's just, if I saw something like that in Granblue, I'd be fine. Like, here's the whole content, and it's pretty easy. And now here's the challenge. It's the same content, but with big difficulty. So maybe that is like an option to switch things
Yeah,
around.
like,
But I wouldn't like to have like a menu
yeah,
that
that
says easy, normal, hard. No, that I wouldn't like.
yeah, usually I'm not a big fan of those either, because what ends up happening is like the difficulty just ends up being like, oh, it's well tuned for normal, but you happen to be a little bit better, and now you go to hard and it's like bloated HP all over the place, and like, well, okay then. But the thing that you were saying, I think, is a good like halfway point, which is kind of like the Diablo 2 method of, okay, so you go through normal, then you go through nightmare, then you go through hell, and it's kind of the same game, but the loot gets better, and so on and so forth, and the difficulty gets higher and higher as you move forward. It actually starts requiring optimization, stuff like that. That could potentially be the way that they do it as well, but we'll see what their choice ends up being with that. But finally, I think one of the most important things about this whole thing is like the Granblue Fantasy on mobile is a gacha game.
Yes.
It's very much just like straight up gacha game. And that game, though, it is important to say, has 31 million registered users. And usually I kind of feel like the overall sentiment online about Granblue Fantasy tends to be positive whenever I see people talking about it. But I don't necessarily go out of my way to look for it because, one, it's a mobile game. I don't really play mobile games. Two, it's a gacha game. I also don't play gacha games for the most part. So it's not something that I look very often. But whenever I look up Granblue Fantasy, people usually have good things to say about the mobile version of Granblue Fantasy. So that brings in the question, what is kind of like the business model of Granblue Fantasy Relink? Because they haven't said, is it going to be like a free-to-play game? Is it going to be like, a pay it once and there you go? People in my comment section were saying that it's most likely going to be, or I think they even said the developers themselves have stated that it is a single-player game, full priced, and that's it. But I haven't heard this, and I haven't seen this information posted anywhere, despite kind of having looked for it. So
yeah, we don't know. We don't know for sure yet. And honestly, like, it does seem well geared to being a free-to-play gacha as well.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It seems very well built to do that. And if they don't, I mean, that's great. But CyGames does know that market really well, and they could potentially try to do it in a console environment.
Yeah,
they could.
That was the thing, right? Because let's just put it like this. I was way more excited for this game before Genshin Impact came out, because I would have never thought. Because listen, when I first saw Genshin Impact, I was like, oh, it's like a Zelda type thing. Why does it require an always online connection? Like, well, what's this about? And then you start playing, it's like, oh, this is a gacha game. Wait, they made a gacha game that looks like Breath of the Wild. Oh no. So when I started looking back at Granblue Fantasy Relink, it kind of like tainted my eyes a little bit. I was like, oh crap, it's this is gonna be just like Genshin, isn't it? Please
Well,
don't.
I still play Genshin, by the way. Like I'm still in it, and
Yeah, I feel sorry for you, dude. It's like
no, I'm fine. I like that game. I take long breaks of Genshin and then come back to a bunch of content because they're still doing new areas. They're still doing story missions, and I really like the lore of Genshin. And it is a gacha that does not force you to engage with the gacha at all. If you want to do the end game content, yes, you're gonna have to grind, and if you don't want to grind, you're gonna have to pay. Because getting gear in that game, getting the gear that you want is tough.
so it's
You
pay to
can
win,
get
is
there.
what you're saying.
Yeah, well, the end game content is all PvE, but yes, it is 100% pay to win there. Thing is, the end game content is very, it's like wave based enemies, so it's not
Yeah,
like interesting content. It's just a challenging mode, right? And if you don't care about that mode, you don't have to care about the gacha at all. You don't
yeah.
have to
That
care about new characters. You don't have to care about gear because you just beat like the story content and an exploration and all that stuff. And that's
the
what I like about Genshin Impact is that it is a free to play game with all these free updates because they're making a ton of money on people that can't hold back purchasing the new waifu and clearing the abyss every 2 weeks or so.
the thing that burned me out on that one was actually the stamina. It ran out way too fast, and at one point I was just like, I remember it was about 20 seconds of me moving my character and then like 2 minutes of standing still, and I was like,
Yeah.
nah, I'm done.
It's not too different from Breath of the Wild if you think about it, but Breath of the Wild gives you a horse. That's the thing.
I felt like in Breath of the Wild the stamina was considerably more generous than in Genshin personally. But either way, besides the point. So it's like my argument here is also that they already kind of have a gacha game. So does that
Yeah.
make sense to have two gacha games in the same franchise?
It's a good point. And they
'Cause-
didn't do it with Granblue Fantasy Versus. With Versus, they did put out a full package, and then they sold DLC like hell. They sold so much DLC, Rui. They sold so much DLC. You're putting out so many characters that all of them are paid for. And the DLC.
How much? So real quick, like quick maths. How much would you say for all of the characters that they've released?
Oh, I stopped.
Would
That
it
game's
be?
netcode was so ass that I just stopped playing it. But
Oh,
now they're
that's
gonna put out
sad.
a new version with rollback, so maybe I'll buy all of it. Let's see. Granblue Fantasy versus Season Pass.
Oh,
How
so it's
much
just like
for
one
that?
season pass,
Oh,
and
there's
you get
two
all
now.
of them. Okay.
There's two now. Okay, first Season Pass has 5 characters, and Season Pass 2 has 6 characters.
So
First Season
11
Pass,
characters. That's not that much,
yeah, well,
depending on
it's
the
30
price.
bucks. $30 for the first one, 35 for the second one,
Okay.
plus the full game.
I mean, it doesn't feel. It's like when you were saying, "Oh, it's so much." I was thinking like Dead or Alive levels of, and it doesn't seem like that is the case.
Well, the base roster, if I recall correctly, had how many characters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 characters in the base roster.
I don't know if that's
There's
a lot or
11
not
characters.
because I don't play fighting games. Is that a lot?
It's on the lower side for fighting. It's acceptable, but on the lower side. And then they have 11 DLC characters. So now it's like a healthy roster. But
Okay.
most of those come from DLC.
So that's one of the things that we can potentially expect. It's like, okay, so you're
I
gonna
think
get the
so.
full game, you're gonna be able to play the full game, and then they're gonna sell you characters as DLC. See, I would much prefer the older style of doing things, which is just like, hey, here's a full game. Actually, it's not even the older style. There are games that still do this, especially in Japan, which is like you get the base version of the game, then you get the ultimate version, which has like a bunch of new content and a bunch of more stuff, and it costs like 40 bones, 50 bones, whatever.
And I think Rising versus Rising, the new version they're going to launch, is exactly that. I think it's going to come with all the DLC characters, and it comes with a bunch of like system changes, rollback netcode, crossplay. There's a Fall Guys
new stages, I would imagine.
new stages. Yeah, new stages. They're going to do new characters too. and new story content as well. Story mode in that game is really cool.
Okay.
And then
Yeah,
they're gonna.
I remember reading something about the story mode in that game being kind of like an RPG thing. Actually, I think it was in one of your videos that you were talking about that.
Yeah, they have gear, and it's like systems they adapted from the gacha
Okay.
into the story mode. Like there's the way you upgrade gear in that game is exactly how you upgrade gear in the gacha. You feed duplicates to a weapon, that kind of
So
stuff.
so that kind of feels like essentially the whole idea is to just expand the universe of Granblue Fantasy to all of these different things, almost in a way where Riot is doing right now with with League of Legends getting Legends of Runeterra and getting the whatever the Ruined King thing that they did with Airship Syndicate and all of these other games around the universe of League of Legends, where League of Legends is the big breadwinner, but they spawn off all of these different things. And it kind of feels like that is potentially what CyGames is doing with Granblue Fantasy,
Yeah,
bringing
I
an
think
action
I think
RPG
that
into the fold.
I think the Riot expansion is well underway. I mean, Valorant is huge, right?
Yeah.
Arcane was just one
Arcane
best.
is
Yeah,
beast. Yeah, I loved
Arcane
Arcane.
Arcane is revolutionary.
Actually,
It's game changing.
it's a good thing that you brought up Arcane because, again, if we make the direct comparison to what Riot is doing, they also did an animation for Granblue Fantasy. So they have the
Yeah,
Granblue Fantasy game, the animation, now a fighting game, and eventually in 2023, the Project Relink.
exactly. Yeah, they're going different routes for sure. Like they're playing it a bit safer, I would say, because you're making like okay an action game where you can play co-op and it's third person action. That's very mainstream, right? Everyone
Yeah.
likes that. Fighting game is a bit more niche, so that was a more risky option. That said, those guys have so much money that they are hired Arc System Works to do it. So one of the best out
Yeah.
there. uh I think Riot is taking some risks because they didn't just do an anime, they did one of the best animations
Yeah,
ever,
yeah, yeah, yeah. They did.
right? So like the really big investment in that. They went first person shooter from a MOBA to first person shooter. That seems risky as hell, but it paid off super well. And now they're going fighting game as well with Project L. Very
Yeah.
excited for that. But yeah, it's like you said, it's companies seeing that they have this huge player base in one of their games and trying to see what else can we do with it. How else can we have these players like engage with our content in different ways, and at the same time probably bring more players into our ecosystem.
Yep.
And I think that the same design philosophies apply too, because you have the assist mode in Relink where you just move the left thumbstick because phone players cannot move more than a thumb. Um, I mean, maybe that's the design philosophy. I don't know. Uh, uh, and then you also have like all these easy to play mechanics for Project L that they have already announced. Because if you're coming from the mobile into a fighting game, that's very daunting. So
Yeah.
they're gonna have one button specials, for instance. They're not gonna have motion inputs, no quarter circle forwards or anything. So they have these friendly mechanics to bring players on board. And the philosophy is kind of the same between the two.
Yeah.
Valorant is brutal. I don't know. Like, I guess a first person shooter you can get away with it because it's like just point your mouse and shoot. And that's easier to understand. But Valorant is brutal. And it just dies so quickly.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like that makes me a little bit more excited. Hopefully, it not being a gacha, and even if it has like a couple of DLC characters, I'll be like, whatever, because if you can still enjoy it and it doesn't go the pay to win route where you got to
Mm.
like, oh no, you need to get all of these items and you need to make sure that you get some random thing that requires you to grind a crap ton. Like I want to grind, but I want to grind because it's fun, not to grind in that sense of like, oh, I need to do this mission 100 times in order to
Mm.
get enough materials to do this other thing.
Oh,
That's
then why
not
do you
as
play
interesting.
Monster Hunter?
I don't have to. I mean, because I know what I'm doing. Because, like, listen, if you're complaining about rubies or anything like that, learn to chop tails and capture. It's that simple. You okay? Don't you come in here bad mouthing my game. No,
The
but
same thing.
no,
Monster Hunter is a gacha without the paying aspect.
Hey, look, see, I'm not 100% against that. See, and listen, if it's a gacha without the pay to win elements, maybe I would actually enjoy a gacha. There you go.
Yeah, there's a good chance that it is. If it is a full priced game, I mean, CyGames are masters of gacha. Not just because, okay, we know how to extract money from players, but also because we know how the psychology side of things works on like numbers going up and grinding and all that stuff. So they could definitely apply something like that to Relink.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. I think it is going to be fun. But again, it all depends on the business model, which I still haven't seen set in stone anywhere. They call it an action RPG. Genshin Impact is called an open world RPG. But in reality, it should be called a gacha. But you know,
I really think gacha is mostly a business model, but it does affect the way the RPG part of the game is built. Yes,
exactly.
the curve is different. The curve is like exponential in a way, where it feels like you're getting a lot of materials and leveling up really good. But the higher level you get, the steeper the curve gets, and you get encouraged to put in money that way, because I mean you've come so far already. You're
Yeah,
just 10
exactly.
levels away. You're just 10 levels away.
It's just a little
You're
bit
so
more.
you're so close.
It's
But
just
yeah,
$1,000 more dollars. You'll be
is that
great. You'll be
the
golden.
progression of those 10 levels is bigger than the first 80 levels that you played.
It's exponential. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very exponential. So the gacha side does affect how the RPG is built, but I really don't think gacha is a genre, even though in the industry we do use that word to describe games a lot, as if it was a genre, because it has a lot of the same tropes. But I agree.
But anyways, we're excited about it. Let's see if we get like a month soon, because right now it just says 2023. So who knows when it's going to come out. And hopefully it won't be during some of the busier parts of the year. Like if you even go anywhere near June, I will murder you, because Final Fantasy 16 is
Street Fighter 6.
Oh yeah, that's in June as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And there's even Diablo 4 in June too, for the people that care about that. So yeah. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. Globku, what are you working on the channel right now?
I'm working on figuring out what I do with the channel, because I don't know.
That's always a good thing.
I'm gonna be checking out some anime mods on Elden Ring. So hey, Souls-like guys, there's some fun stuff there. And I'm speedrunning Dragon Ball Z Kakarot at some point. So I'm starting with the latest DLC, and then maybe someday I'll do the full game. But that's like a 4-hour speedrun. It's very long.
That requires quite some dedication, but there'll be a link to Globku's channel in the description below. He covers a ton of fighting games. He's going to be covering the Elden Ring anime mods and some Kakarot stuff, so you guys can go check that out there. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.